In a poor southern town, a 26-year-old black woman worked tirelessly just to buy a small birthday cake for her paralyzed younger brother. At the local grocery store, she came across an elderly man struggling to afford a cake for his wife, mocked and pushed aside by others because of his ragged appearance. Her little brother didn't hesitate to give the only cake he had to that man. What they didn't know, he was a legendary war hero, and that small act of kindness would change their lives forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thought. It was late afternoon in the outskirts of a small southern town, the kind of place where the sidewalks are cracked, the air hangs heavy with humidity, and neighbors peek from behind tattered curtains but rarely offer a kind word. The dollar store on the corner was one of the few businesses still clinging to life, its neon sign flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay on or give up completely. People came and went, some in pressed uniforms, others in business attire, but most kept to themselves, careful not to acknowledge those they deemed beneath them. Especially her. She stepped off the bus slowly, one hand gripping the worn handle of a wheelchair. 26 years old, tall and thin from too many skipped meals, her skin a deep rich brown, her braids pulled back tight under a faded cap. Her work shirt, blue with a name tag that read Kira, was still stained from the morning shift at the diner. The sweat on her neck hadn't dried, and her sneakers, duct-taped at the sides, whispered against the pavement. Behind her, in the wheelchair, was a boy, 12 years old, sweet-faced, skin a shade lighter than hers, legs motionless under a threadbare blanket. His name was Malik. As they rolled toward the store entrance, Kira felt it again, that familiar tightness in her chest when the world reminded her she didn't belong. A white woman in a floral blouse pulled her purse a little closer. A teenage boy smirked and nudged his friend, whispering she'd probably beggin' again. The cashier inside glanced up, then immediately looked back down at her phone. Kira had stopped being surprised by what stung was Malik noticing. But today was different. Today Kira had money in her pocket. Not much, just enough for rent, groceries, and one very small birthday cake. A promise she'd made 3 months ago, after tucking Malik into bed. Next birthday, she'd whispered, there'll be cake, real cake, with your name on it. She'd worked 3 extra hours every shift since then, barely sleeping, barely standing sometimes, just to keep that promise alive. And now it was time. She was nervous, not because she didn't have enough dope, she'd counted it 10 times, but because in this world, even doing the right thing didn't always mean you'd be treated right. Kira held the door open and pushed Malik inside. The cold air hit her skin, but not as cold as the stares that followed. She straightened her back. Let them look. Malik smiled up at her, his voice quiet but full of excitement. Do you think they'll have chocolate? Kira nodded, forcing a smile. Let's go see, birthday boy. But deep down something ached, not from tiredness, not from poverty, from the way people looked at her, as if her presence dirtied the room. As if her love for her brother, her hard work, her dignity, somehow weren't enough to make her human in their eyes. The store smelled faintly of bleach and stale sugar, like most cheap corner groceries that stocked more lottery tickets than fresh produce. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above Kira's head as she navigated the narrow aisles with Malik's wheelchair. The birthday cake section sat at the back, past the canned goods and beneath a freezer so loud it sounded like it was trying to breathe. Kira pushed toward it, her heart beating just a little faster. It wasn't just a cake. It was the moment she had been clinging to for months. The moment where, just maybe, Malik could forget he was stuck in that chair. Forget they were scraping by. Forget everything but the taste of sweet frosting and a candle's glow. As they rounded the final aisle, Kira spotted him first. A hunched old man in front of the cake display, his figure almost blending into the shadows of the freezer's hum. He was tall, though his back curved with time. His clothes were worn dark slacks too long, a jacket 2 sizes too big, and shoes that had lost their shine decades ago. His hair was white, wild in places, and a thin tremor ran through his fingers as he held a small wad of crumpled bills in one hand and a grocery flyer in the other. He wasn't just browsing. He was struggling, and he looked completely, achingly lost. Kira slowed her steps, watching as he shifted from one foot to the other, eyes flicking between the cakes behind the glass and the cash he held like it might magically increase if he stared long enough. She didn't say anything at first, just stood quietly beside Malik, trying to read the moment. But others weren't so patient. A woman in a blazer walked by, rolling her eyes. "Somebody move him, blocking the whole damn freezer," a stock boy snorted. "Bet he's just trying to stay cool. Probably ain't even buying anything." A man in a ball cap whispered loudly, "Smells like old socks, ain't right letting people like that wander around in here." Kira felt the burn of it in her chest, rage and recognition. She knew those words, knew that tone. She'd heard them all her life, aimed at her mother, at her father, and now at her. Malik's eyes darted up to hers, his smile gone. He wasn't a baby anymore. He understood. He understood too well. She leaned closer, whispering in his ear. "Ignore them. Some folks don't know how to see people unless they're wearing a suit." Malik didn't answer, just nodded and kept watching the old man, curiosity softening the corners of his frown. Kira finally stepped forward. "Sir?" she said gently. The man turned, startled but not unkind. His eyes were pale blue and tired, set deep into a weathered face that had once known strength. "Are you looking for something?" she asked. He blinked at her, and for a moment it seemed like he might walk away, mumble an apology and disappear. But then he cleared his throat. "Today's her birthday," he said simply. "My wife. 47 years together." His voice was raspy but steady. "Thought I'd surprise her. Thought maybe—" He didn't finish the sentence, just looked down at the bills in his hand like they'd betrayed him. Kira's chest tightened. She understood that look, the quiet math of poverty, the calculation of how much dignity you could afford. "I'm sorry," he muttered, stepping aside. "Didn't mean to hold y'all up." Kira shook her head. "No, you're fine. We're just browsing." She tried to keep her voice light, even as she noticed him glance again at a small chocolate cake with white frosting. It had roses piped in pink icing and a tiny sticker, $6.79. His fingers hesitated near it, then dropped. As he shuffled away, Malik looked up at her. "Kira?" he said quietly. "He didn't buy anything." She nodded. "I saw. He wanted that one, with the pink flowers." "Yeah," she whispered, following the old man with her eyes as he disappeared past the cereal aisle. "He did." Kira turned back to the freezer. There weren't many choices left. Most cakes were already picked over, likely from families getting ready for weekend cookouts or birthday parties with more guests than she and Malik had ever known. Still, she found one small enough to match her budget. Not chocolate, but close. Vanilla with fudge drizzle. Malik didn't complain. He never did. They made their way to the checkout. The same cashier who had ignored them when they walked in now eyed them with suspicion, as if waiting for Kira to pull out food stamps or argue over the price. She didn't. She handed over exact change, the folded bills warm with sweat from her palm. As the cashier bagged the cake with mechanical disinterest, Malik twisted in his seat. He was watching the door. Kira followed his gaze. The old man was just outside, paused near the exit, one hand on the rusted handle of the shopping cart he hadn't used. His head was low. He looked smaller now, like the weight of the day had pressed him down into himself. Then, without warning, Malik spoke, loud enough to cut through the beeps and murmurs. "Sir," he called. The old man turned, and everything stopped. Kira blinked. "Malik!" The boy was already holding out the cake bag, his little arm trembling slightly from the effort. "It's my birthday too," he said, a smile returning to his face, bright and unshakable. "And I think your wife would like this one." The cashier froze. So did the woman behind them in line. For a second the whole store breathed in and forgot to let go. The old man didn't move. His lips parted, but no sound came. Kira stepped beside Malik, her voice low and even. "We'd like to give it to her, if that's all right." His eyes glassed over. "I can't," he began. "You can," Kira said, not unkindly. "We want to." And for the first time in that whole bitter hour, someone in the store smiled back. The old man stepped forward slowly, almost reverently. He reached out with both hands, cupping the bag like it was made of glass. "You're sure?" Molly beamed. "She deserves a good birthday." He nodded, swallowing hard. "So do you." No one said another word as he turned and walked out, the cake cradled to his chest. Kira and Malik stood in silence, surrounded by a store that suddenly felt a little less cold. The beeping resumed. The whispers returned, but for one brief moment something good had cracked through the noise. Kira placed her hand on Malik's shoulder. "You sure you're okay?" she asked as they headed toward the door. Malik looked up, peaceful. "I think." He needed it more. Kira didn't answer. She just reached into the bag, pulled out the last 2 oatmeal cookies she'd grabbed on the way out, and handed one to him. They walked out into the golden hour, sharing crumbs and laughter that tasted sweeter than any cake. The late sun had begun to dip low behind the broken rooftops of the neighborhood as Kira and Malik made their slow way home. The wheels of the old metal chair squeaked with every bump on the cracked sidewalk, but neither of them spoke. The brown paper bag that once held a birthday cake now swung gently from the handle, empty except for the napkins and the receipt. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was the kind of quiet that follows something good, something real. Still, Kira kept glancing down at her brother, trying to read the emotion on his face. Malik wasn't like most boys. He didn't throw tantrums. He didn't pout or sulk when he didn't get his way. But Kira knew how much that cake had meant to him. She'd seen the way he'd looked at it through the freezer glass, the way his fingers had lightly touched the frosting through the bag. And then he gave it away. She finally broke the silence. "You know," she said gently, "you didn't have to do that." Malik's voice was soft but sure. "I know." Kira stopped pushing for a second, leaning over to meet his eyes. "I mean it, Mal. That was your cake, your day. You worked just as hard as I did, waiting for it." Malik shrugged, and for a moment he looked much older than 12. He looked like he hadn't given her a gift in years. His voice cracked, just a little, and he cleared his throat. "She probably waits all year for him to remember. I think she deserved a cake, too." Kira swallowed hard. "You're too good for this world sometimes." Malik tilted his head toward her. "Is that a bad thing?" She smiled through the ache in her throat. "No, baby, it's the best thing." The streets were quiet now, painted gold by the setting sun. A few porch lights blinked on as they passed, the kind of lights that said, "Don't come knocking," more than "Welcome home." As they reached their building, Kira noticed a smell in the air, something sweet, faint, warm. Cookies. She let out a soft laugh. "Well," she said, "turns out I've got backup plans." She reached into her bag, pulled out 2 oatmeal cookies and handed one to Malik. "Bought these just in case we burned the cake or something. Didn't think we'd end up giving it away instead." Malik bit into his, chewing thoughtfully. "Not bad," he said with a grin, crumbs clinging to the corner of his mouth. Kira smiled and took a bite of her own. It was dry, overly sweet, probably stale, but right now, it tasted like kindness. That line stayed with Kira long after Malik had fallen asleep beside her. As she tucked a blanket over him and turned off the lamp, her mind drifted back to her own past, to the birthdays she used to celebrate when their parents were still alive, when the world still felt fair, to the laughter around a crowded table and the smell of buttercream frosting and the way her mother used to sing off-key but loud and proud. Those days were gone now. Lost in a fire, in a hospital bill, in years of working 2 jobs just to stand still. But maybe today was the beginning of something else. Maybe this was how you built joy again, from the ground up, from someone else's smile. She went to bed hungry that night, but not empty, and just before she drifted off, she thought of the old man walking home, cake in hand, and a woman's voice on the other end of that door saying, "You remembered." And for once, she let herself believe that the world might just pay attention when someone gives, even when they have nothing left to give. Tomorrow would be another long day. Rent was still due, the hours at the diner still stretched too thin. Malik still needed more than she could always provide, but tonight, just for tonight, there had been cake and love and a moment of dignity passed from child to elder like a sacred secret, and that was something worth remembering. The old man didn't sleep that night. The cake sat untouched on the small kitchen table, still in its grocery store box, the pink roses slightly smudged from the heat. His wife, Eleanor, had fallen asleep early, as she often did now, her body tired from the years, her memory softening around the edges. But when he'd come home, she had stirred at the sound of the door, and her eyes, though dimmed by time, had lit up at the sight of that small, humble cake. "Oh, Robert," she'd whispered, reaching for his hand. "You remembered." He hadn't known what to say. He simply nodded and kissed her forehead. How could he begin to explain where the cake came from? How could he tell her that a boy in a wheelchair, barely more than a child, had given up his own birthday for hers? That the sister who stood beside him had eyes that had seen too much struggle but still glowed with strength. He had tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat like stones, so he said nothing. Just held her hand until she drifted off again, her breathing soft and even in the silence of the small, dimly lit house. Now, long past midnight, Robert sat alone by the table, the old fan groaning in the corner, his thoughts loud enough to drown out the quiet. He looked down at his hands, wrinkled, veined, and calloused from years of command and labor, hands that once held medals, shook the palms of generals, carried wounded men from the battlefield. Once he had been somebody, Colonel Robert Langston, decorated, feared, respected, but that was decades ago. Before the injuries, before the VA delays, before retirement turned into obscurity and dignity into quiet desperation. He had disappeared from that world on purpose, faded into this forgotten town with Eleanor, seeking peace, anonymity, something like rest. But what he hadn't counted on was how hard life could be, even after surviving war. Retirement wasn't soft. It was sharp in ways battlefields never were. Watching bills pile up, prescriptions go unfilled, Eleanor's memory slip in and out like a faulty light bulb. There had been months when they had to choose between heating the house and filling the fridge. He had learned to disappear not just from the world, but from himself. But that boy, that girl. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, remembering the moment when the boy had called his name, that clear young voice cutting through a store full of suspicion. He had seen so many things in his life, violence, loss, betrayal, but he had never seen anything quite like the look in that child's eyes. Pure, unguarded generosity. No expectation, no strings, just a belief that someone else mattered more in that moment. Robert closed his eyes, and for the first time in years he prayed. Not the prayers he used to recite out of duty before missions or at memorials, but a quiet, raw prayer of gratitude, of awakening. That cake had done something he hadn't expected. It had shaken loose something inside him. Not guilt, but responsibility. He had known men who died wishing they'd done more, and here he was, alive, able, and watching goodness rise from poverty while he remained hidden in comfortless obscurity. He rose from the table slowly, joints stiff and crackling with the weight of age and decision. He didn't need sleep. He needed purpose, the kind that only action could give. So he went to the corner of the living room where an old chest sat under a faded American flag. He hadn't opened it in years. Inside was the past, photographs, commendations, a folded uniform, and a single envelope with an address he never threw away. He held it now like it might vanish if he blinked too hard. Inside was the name of a former student, a soldier he had mentored long ago, back when he was still teaching at the academy. Now that boy was no longer a boy, he was a general, a man who had risen through the ranks like a storm with brilliance and fire. They hadn't spoken in almost 15 years, not since Robert had walked away, refusing medals and speeches, disappearing without a trace. But that student had once said, "If you ever call, sir, I'll come running." Robert found the number. It was late, but it didn't matter. Power wasn't bound by office hours. The phone rang once, twice. Then, "Colonel?" The voice was older now, but unmistakable. "Is that really you?" Robert let out a slow breath. "I need your help, son." There was silence on the line, thick and stunned. "I never thought I'd hear from you again," the man finally said. "Where have you been? People thought you'd passed. I searched—" "I know," Robert cut in gently. "I needed to be gone. But tonight, something happened. Something I can't ignore." "Tell me." "There's a girl. And her little brother. Poor but proud. Stronger than most officers I trained. They gave me something I couldn't have bought with all my pensions combined. Not money. Not pity. Just honor. They reminded me who I used to be." The man's voice softened. "What do you need?" "I want them taken care of. Quietly. But fully. The boy? He needs medical support. Education. The girl? She deserves a job that doesn't break her back for scraps. A home that doesn't fall apart when it rains. I don't want charity sent their way. I want respect. I want recognition. I want their lives changed." There was no hesitation. "Done." Robert closed his eyes. "Thank you. We owe you, Colonel. The Corps owes you. And if you say this girl and her brother are worth our time, then I'll treat them like family." After they hung up, Robert sat in silence for a moment. The ache in his body hadn't eased, but the weight in his chest had. For the first time in years he felt useful, not as a soldier, not as a relic, but as a man who could still pass something forward. He turned to look at Eleanor sleeping peacefully beneath her threadbare quilt. He walked over, bent down, and kissed her cheek. "Happy birthday, darling," he whispered. "I think that cake came with a miracle." And somewhere, in a part of himself he thought he'd buried beneath metals and years, Robert Langston smiled, not because the world had gotten easier, but because two strangers in a grocery store reminded him it was still worth fighting for. The next morning broke soft and slow, with streaks of pale light cutting through the clouds like hope after a storm. Kira was already up, standing by the window with a chipped coffee mug in her hands, though the coffee inside had long gone cold. She hadn't slept much, too many thoughts circling like tired birds inside her mind. Malik was still curled up on the couch under his blanket, a peaceful look on his face that reminded her of when he was 5 and still believed in superheroes. She watched the street below. Quiet, familiar, worn. Nothing ever really changed on this block. The same rusted cars, the same tilted fences, the same smell of old concrete baking under a too early sun. And yet, something felt different. She couldn't name it, but it buzzed just under her skin, like the quiet before thunder. Then she heard it, first as a distant hum, low and steady, then rising. A sound too clean, too synchronized to belong to the garbage trucks or beat-up delivery vans that usually passed through. She moved closer to the window and squinted toward the corner where the street met the main road. And that's when she saw them. Black SUVs, military gray, windows tinted, exteriors polished like mirrors. They didn't roll in, they arrived, in formation, like a caravan of authority that had never once stepped foot in this neighborhood. Behind them, a single vehicle larger than the rest, marked with the seal of the United States Army, pulled up like it belonged to another world. Doors opened in perfect rhythm. Men and women in dress uniforms stepped out, boots touching cracked pavement like they had no idea it might crumble beneath them. Kira blinked. At first her mind told her it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone famous had gotten lost, maybe there was a drill, maybe this wasn't for them. But then she saw the man. Older, tall, upright despite his cane, the same white hair now neatly combed, the same jacket, only now pressed and proud with rows of medals pinned to the chest. He stepped forward, eyes scanning until they landed right on her window. He nodded once, Kira's breath caught in her throat. Malik stirred behind her. "What's that sound?" he asked groggily. She turned slowly. I think it's for us." By the time they made it downstairs, the entire block had woken. Doors opened, neighbors peeked out in robes and slippers, staring wide-eyed at the scene unfolding. The military personnel had formed 2 neat lines leading up to the sidewalk in front of Kira's building. At the center, standing with quiet command, was the general. Robert Langston. His posture a defiant echo of the man he used to be. He stepped forward as Kira and Malik approached, her hand gently resting on the back of his wheelchair, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Miss Campbell," he began, voice steady but warm, "and Master Malik." He gave a respectful nod to the boy. "I don't know what kind of world lets a woman like you go unseen, or lets a child like him give up a cake just to remind an old man who he used to be, but I know this. What you gave me wasn't dessert, it was dignity, and I intend to repay it." Kira opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her throat tightened, heart pounding. She'd been spoken to by bosses, managers, cops, landlords, but never like this, never with reverence. Robert continued. "Effective today, under special directive, you've been approved for a full housing grant, safe, permanent, and accessible for your brother. Malik will receive complete medical evaluation and therapy resources through our veteran-supported care program. And as for you, Kira?" He paused, smiling. "You've got a new position waiting at the local Veteran Resource Center. Full salary, benefits, leadership training. You've spent enough years holding others up. Now it's our turn." Murmurs rippled through the watching crowd. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Is she military?" And still Kira stood frozen, tears brimming in her eyes but refusing to fall. She looked down at Malik. His face was glowing, not with confusion, but awe. The general stepped closer and crouched, carefully meeting Malik's eyes. "You gave something precious away, young man. That kind of heart doesn't just happen. It's raised, it's chosen, and it's noticed." Malik smiled, a little shy but steady. "She raised me good," he said softly, "and she keeps her promises." Robert looked up at Kira again. "That she does." A few moments later, one of the soldiers stepped forward with a folder and a set of keys, offering them with a small bow. "Your new address," he said. "It's just 10 blocks from here, but it's a whole different world." Kira reached out slowly, hands trembling, and took the keys. They felt heavier than metal, like symbols of something she'd forgotten how to believe in. She held them against her chest, then looked back at the man who had changed everything. "Well," she whispered, her voice breaking, "why us?" Robert didn't hesitate. "Because good doesn't always get seen, and when it is, someone has to make sure it doesn't go unrewarded." The sun was higher now, and for the first time in years Kira felt it warm her skin without the sting of dread. No shift to rush to, no rent hanging over her, no guilt clinging to the edges of a good moment. Just possibility. Just breath. Just her and Malik, standing in the middle of a street where, for once, everyone had stopped to notice the quiet heroes. Later that day, as they walked through the doorway of their new home, bright, clean, smelling faintly of fresh paint and lemon polish, Kira turned to Malik and whispered, "You know this was supposed to be your birthday." He smiled up at her, wheeling himself toward a wide-open living room window where sunlight poured in like honey. "It still is," he said. "Best one ever." Kira laughed, full and unafraid, then knelt down and kissed the top of his head. "Next year," she said, "there will be cake, big one, chocolate, double frosting." Malik grinned. "Only if we get to share it again," and just like that, the world didn't seem so hard. Not perfect, not fixed, but better because sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness, one tiny cake to turn a broken path into a road that leads home. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.